I am.
Ready? Awesome. Good afternoon, everybody. Call this meeting to order. Today is April 10th, 2023 at 1:01 p.m. And we are here for the special meeting agenda for the Ad Hoc Advisory Committee for the Rainbow Municipal Water District and Fallbrook Public Utility District reorganization proposals. I'm moderator Adam Wilson, been serving with you guys for the last couple of years. And so thank you for everybody coming and participating in person today. So thank you. It's good to see everybody. We'll move on to item number 2, which is our roll call by our commission clerk.
Brian Albright.
Here.
Jack Beebe.
Here.
Mel Katz.
Yes, here.
Nick Canettis.
Here.
Tom Kennedy.
Here.
Sandy Curl. Here. Lydia Romero. Here. Nick Serrano.
Here.
Emily Thorner. Here. Keith Greer. Absent. There's a quorum with 9 present.
Thank you, Tammy. And once again, thank you for everybody attending in person. I look forward to today's participation. So we'll move on to item number 3, which is the agenda review by the moderator, myself. I have no additional changes. You received all the agenda and material in the package through our communication. It's been, I think, since August since we've last met. So there's been a lot going on since then. And I hope we've been able to at least keep you apprised through our communications and most specifically our website that has been updated throughout this process with the abundant amount of material that's been a part of these proposals. So with that, I'll move on to item number 4, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to provide comments on a non-agenda topic germane to the advisory committee. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and I will check with our clerk if there are any comment slips submitted to speak at this time.
No public comments.
No public comments. Thank you. That concludes that item. We will now move on to our business items under 5. The first one is 5A, is the approval of our action minutes for our last meeting, August 11th, 2022. The draft minutes are in action format and recommended for your approval, and we'll entertain a motion as you guys see fit. Got a motion by Tom Kennedy.
Second.
A second by Sandy Curl. We can do a voice vote. So all in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. That motion passes unanimously with all members being present. That will move us on to item 5B, which is the update on our proposed Rainbow Municipal Water District and Fallbrook PUD reorganizations. The committee has received an update with concluding administrative reviews involving 2 related proposals related to the detachments from the Water Authority to Eastern Municipal Water District. This update includes a presentation from Priscilla. It's in your draft agenda report representing staff's evaluations of the proposals under our statutes and policies. It is requested that the committee receive the update, discuss the draft agenda report, and provide any feedback as you guys see appropriate, whether that would be individually or collectively through some sort of formal recommendation. So with that, I'll pass it on to Priscilla and we'll go from there.
Well, good afternoon, Ad Hoc Committee. Thank you so much. Priscilla Mumpower, Analyst 2 with San Diego County LAFCO and Project Manager on these reorganization proposals. Before the committee today is a complete draft report on the 2 reorganization proposals filed almost 3 years ago from Fallbrook Public Utility District and Rainbow Municipal Water District, and done so at the unanimous direction of their governing boards. The draft report was administratively bundled together with the consent of the applicants, given their parallel interest in concurrently detaching from the County Water Authority and annexing to the Eastern Municipal Water District. Today's presentation follows presentations to both the Special Districts Advisory Committee and the City's Advisory Committee, and includes revisions. Those are shown in track changes within the agenda report and are mostly limited to the policy L107 considerations. Now, the draft report is being presented today with 3 specific purposes. Thank you, Do. So the first is to hear directly from LAFCO staff on what we believe warrants commission attention in making informed decisions on the proposals. 2, to hear directly from LAFCO staff on its analysis of these topics, including critical assumptions such as how we assess significant or reliable. And lastly, to provide the committee a forum to discuss the draft report, seek clarifications, and should you collectively choose, either make specific requests or make a recommendation to the executive officer and step with us moving forward with a final report in June. Now, a couple of important prefaces in taking in the draft report today. First, the draft report is complete with respect to including analysis on all the topics LAFCO staff believes are warranted under state statute and local policy, less any specific recommendations. The recommendations will be added in the final version only after we've met our commitment to meet with all the advisory committees. So we've already met that commitment with the special districts and cities advisory committee, and today we meet with you all. Second, the draft report does include 3 options that LAFCO staff believes represent one of 3 reasonable outcomes that sync to different possible commission policy preferences and or priorities. It is reasonable to assume that one of these options will become a final recommendation from LAFCO staff. And third, and for the benefit of being clear on expectations, while we may revise what's already in the draft report and possibly refine the options as merited, we don't anticipate tackling any new topics at this point, as we do believe we've exhausted the topics meriting attention on our end, and we will await further direction once the items are on the dais. And so with these prefaces aside, and for the benefit of drilling down on the topics that we anticipate will generate the most discussion, and in some cases disagreement, I'm going to go ahead and focus my remaining presentation on 18 ancillary items that are going to be shown on the next 2 slides that we've addressed in the draft report for our policy L107, and direct staff to disclose and evaluate known jurisdictional and or policy disputes. All of them have merit, so I'm going to, in short order, briefly summarize each. Beginning with A and B, Met's position on the detachments and Sandag's position on the detachments. So with respect to Met, we have received 2 letters, each which are divergent from one another. The first was submitted in September of 2020 from the then GM, and it outlined a somewhat agnostic take on the reorganizations. The second letter was received following our presentations to the special districts and cities advisory committees. And this was from Chair Adan Ortega. And this letter was not agnostic. It instead outlined specific concerns with the reorganizations and the applicants prioritizing their own cost savings over regional planning. While the letters somewhat moot one another, LAFCO staff acknowledges having the Met chair weigh in on the topic is certainly notable, and is something the ad hoc and eventually the commission should consider in their respective deliberations. Now, with respect to Sandag, the agency has not submitted comments to LAFCO on the proposed attachments, and as such, staff believes it is reasonable to assume there are no direct conflicts tied to the detachments. Now, with respect to the financial impacts of these attachments following reorganization, should it be approved, I'm going to begin by going over financial differences between roll-offs and detachment. Now, the committee will recall you formed a working group which assessed this topic, and specifically the key differences between roll-off and detachment with regard to what those financial impacts would be to the county water authority. The working group concluded that the impact of detachment and roll-off are different, in that an agency that rolls off is still a member agency of the county water authority and will be contributing to future cost increases and rates set by the board. However, a detachment, once complete, means that a member agency is no longer a member agency of the County Water Authority and will not be contributing to the future costs. That is unless an exit fee is conditioned by LAFCO for a certain period of time. Further, the working group recommended that the revenue impacts of a roll-off be further assessed as part of a municipal service review on the San Diego County Water Authority. So in further considering this topic, following the special districts and cities advisory committee, LAFCO staff moved forward, and you'll see that in track changes, in assessing the financial impacts of roll-offs tied to the 3 reuse projects in the county, and then comparing that to the proposed detachments. So LAFCO staff estimates that the 3 reuse projects, and those being City of San Diego Pure Water, City of Oceanside Pure Water, and the East County Advanced Water Purification projects will or could result, in an approximate 9.4% increase to ratepayers by the end of this decade. Conversely, detachments would produce an approximate 2.5% increase to ratepayers by the end of this decade. This importantly reflects a nearly 4-fold difference between the impact that the reuse projects will have at 9.4% and the impact that the detachments will have at 2.5%. So moving on to D, the detachment's impact on the County Water Authority's credit rating. So given Standard & Poor's own observations on the topics, staff believes it is reasonable to assume that the detachments would impact the County Water Authority's credit rating. However, the impact would be less than significant given 1, several other factors contributed to Standard & Poor's rating, and 2, the impact focused on financial considerations, which presumably would be controlled via a conditioned exit fee. The financial impacts from detachments. So while both the applicants and the County Water Authority have submitted their own estimates to Dr. Hanneman, in his final report, he calculates a total net revenue loss to the County Water Authority and by extension to the remaining member agencies at $12.6 million each year over the first 10 years or in the short run, and $10.9 million annually after the 10th year or in the long run. LAFCO staff proceeded to calculate the individual cost impacts for the remaining member agencies and their ratepayers using equivalent meter units and using the $12.6 million figure. In doing so, staff estimates the remaining member agencies, ratepayers, would experience an average increase to their water bills of $26.41 annually, which equates to $2.20 monthly. As a baseline, as the largest member agency, the City of San Diego ratepayers will experience an annual and monthly increase of $12.60 and $1.05 respectively. In contrast, with the smallest member agency, the Uema Municipal Water District ratepayers will experience an annual and monthly increase of $224.56 and $18.71 respectively. A breakdown of impacts to all remaining member agencies is provided within the agenda report. Now, at the request of the Special Districts Advisory Committee on March 17th, we further dived in on this topic just to be able to provide the net annual impacts to each member agency prior to the payment of an exit fee, but also accounting for, and I'm going to get to this in a moment, a confirmed $38.6 million savings tied to the North County Emergency Storage Pump Station. So that table is provided within the agenda report as well. So now that we've talked about what are the financial impacts, how do we assess the significance of these impacts to both the County Water Authority and their ratepayers? LAFCO staff believes that assessing the overall significance on the calculated financial impacts relative to inflation serves as a reasonable and certain measurement for the purposes of this analysis. So staff focused in on a 1-year inflation rate rather than a multi-year analysis. And this would mean that we would parallel with the analysis that Dr. Hanneman provided as well. Now, the current 1-year inflation rate sits at 6.4%. Staff's analysis then focused on 2 other measurements. So 1, the annual net revenue impact to the County Water Authority of $12.58 million, which represents 4.4% of the County Water Authority's 2023 gross water sales revenue. And 2, average annual ratepayer impacts among member agencies of $26.41 represents a 3.6% increase in ratepayer charges. So notably, a 4.4% impact to the County Water Authority and a 3.6% impact to ratepayers are both below 6.4%, the 1-year inflation rate, and therefore reasonably considered to be less than significant relative to other day-to-day cost of living increases. Now, despite this conclusion, LAFCO staff continues to believe that there's justification in applying exit fees. So with respect to the topic of an exit fee, I'm going to move on to G, which are considering the merits and then the options to imposing exit fees and other payments. So LAFCO staff believes it is sufficiently reasonable to require exit fees on the applicants should the detachments proceed. This conclusion aligns with the uniformly accepted acknowledgement from all sides, albeit with different estimates, that the detachments will result in unavoidable financial impacts to the County Water Authority in the near term. So with respect to options, LAFCO staff believes that the focus of the exit fee should be in mitigating the annual net revenue losses. Now, while member agencies have requested LAFCO impose exit fees, including dedicated payments over a longer period or their proportionate share of outstanding long-term debt obligations, this appears impractical and unreasonable, as staff believes any exit fees set to also recover outstanding debt over the same time would appear as double counting. So what is the appropriate length of an exit fee? So Dr. Hanneman advised LAFCO and the ad hoc committee that a reasonable length of period to apply an exit fee would be between 3 and 10 years. Dr. Hanneman further advised that any term beyond 10 years would be unreasonable. So drawing from this parameter, LAFCO staff believes it's reasonable to land on 5 years as a good and reasonable benchmark. This conclusion is further supported by the ad hoc working group, who noted that future cost allocations are best predicted using a 5-year period, and also noting that urban water management plans set to support long-term resources, as well as LAFCO's municipal service reviews, are prepared every 5 years. Now, moving on to the last point on this slide. So what is LAFCO's authority in requiring exit fees when looking at both the County Water Authority Act and CKH? While the applicants have been consistent in their comments that the County Water Authority Act does not contemplate the imposition of exit fees, and instead only provides for the continued payment of property taxes to cover any remaining debts, LAFCO staff acknowledges this to be true, however, does not believe this precludes LAFCO from its authority and statute to condition approval on the payment of an exit fee. Additionally, while the applicants have commented and questioned LAFCO's authority in imposing an exit fee, given the Antelope Valley East Kern versus Los Angeles County LAFCO court decision, LAFCO counsel concludes that this referenced court decision does not impact LAFCO's decision-making on the topic of exit fees. So now that we've established the merits of imposing an exit fee, now I'm going to move on to the next slide and the topic of discounting the exit fee with respect to considering the North County pump station. So the County Water Authority has plans to implement the final phase of its multi-phase emergency water storage project to extend emergency water supply service to the northernmost portions of San Diego County. However, work ceased at the direction of the County Water Authority Board and until the resolution of the proposals. This topic was also assessed and discussed at length by the working group formed by this ad hoc committee. And the working group identified 21 million budgeted by the County Water Authority in 2010 for the ESP North County pump station. However, the County Water Authority separately and more recently referenced a cost of approximately 40 million in a September 2020 response to LAFCO. And even more recently in their fiscal year 2022 to 2023 budget. So as such, staff believes the full discount of $38.6 million is reasonable. I'm going to address K and L together. So with respect to risk to applicants in greater reliance on the Sacramento Bay Delta, and then risk to applicants in changes to MET's wholesale rates. So Dr. Hanneman advised that there are potential risks to both the applicants and their ratepayers with respect to increased reliance on the Bay Delta. However, specifically concludes that while the applicants may face challenges if they switch wholesale suppliers, ultimately the challenge rests in paying a higher price than they had anticipated to get by in a drought, rather than that of running out of water. Notably, he asserts that the applicants are taking a financial gamble. With respect to how the reorganization proposals may impact the County Water Authority's voting power at MET. If the applicants, both Fallbrook and Rainbow service areas, are detached from the County Water Authority, the weight of the authority's vote will be reduced by 1,021 votes, and the weight of Eastern's vote will be correspondingly increased. This would substantively result in a 0.3% transfer of voting power at MET from the County Water Authority to Eastern Municipal Water District. So in assessing the significance of that transfer, LAFCO staff reviewed the last 900 plus votes of the MET board during the last 10 years. And within this period, there have only been 3 votes in which the decision was within this margin of 0.3%, which would be shifted. One of these votes involved the appointment of the current MET GM, which creates an outlier in assessing the significance associated with the vote transfer, given the possibility of repeating in the future with the aid of approving the detachments. So with respect to the effect of current projects within the county, and specifically the reuse projects I previously mentioned, the proposed reorganization does not appear to have any material direct impacts on these other reuse projects. Again, those being the City of San Diego Pure Water Project, Pure Water Oceanside, and the East County Advanced Water Purification. However, we dived into it a little more and should be in track changes there. But as noted in C, the reuse projects will supply 50,000 acre feet of water. So this would thereby reduce the County Water Authority's annual water sales revenue by $47 million per year by the end of 2029. So this long-term impact that the County Water Authority and its member agencies will have to address in order to increase fixed revenues to cover these fixed costs. With respect to emergency supplies during a catastrophic event, LAFCO staff believes MET's existing emergency response plan of restoring service within 14 days, paired with Eastern Municipal Water District's ability to provide potable water service in an emergency, provide sufficient assurances that risks are reasonably controlled. LAFCO staff separately notes that Rainbow and Fallbrook both have a combined local water storage of over 2,000 acre-feet, which is equivalent to accommodating 73 days of average day demand without recharge, and provides additional assurances of continued service during an emergency. With respect to the effect of stipulated CEQA settlements on LAFCO, staff continues to maintain that there is no material impact on the commission's decision-making and related discretion under CEQA, given LAFCO is not a party to the stipulated judgments. Accordingly, and as advised by commission counsel, LAFCO is not bound by these stipulated judgments. With respect to determining the effective territory for election purposes, staff, as advised by commission counsel, maintains that an election within the effective territory may be held. However, expanding the election to include all voters within the County Water Authority is not an option, given the County Water Authority requesting non-district status under CKH and the guidance provided under the County Water Authority's Principal Act. The commission, however, may choose to expand the election to include voters within the jurisdictional boundary of Eastern Municipal Water District. And lastly, the role of agriculture in the proposals and LAFCO's decision-making. So a central premise to the applicant's attachment proposals involves providing economic relief to their agricultural customers by securing less expensive water supplies from Eastern Municipal Water District. The economic relief ties to the approximate 26% cost savings in the current all-in acre-foot charge between the County Water Authority and Eastern. This cost savings looms significant for both of the applicants, as agricultural customers currently represent 36% of all retail sales in Fallbrook and 65% of all retail sales in Rainbow. Now, although independent, LAFCO is expected via statute to encourage planned, well-ordered, efficient urban development patterns, while concurrently providing for the preservation of agriculture and open space lands. This includes specific consideration of the effects of jurisdictional changes on agriculture. Relatedly, San Diego LAFCO recently updated its own implementing policies relevant to preserving agriculture in September of 2020, and among other items, added a section to enhance agriculture in San Diego County. Staff believes it is reasonable and due to the substantive tie between statute and policy to treat agriculture as a unique and/or protected group, and in doing so, make special accommodations as the commission may deem appropriate. So with that, committee, I provided you with so much information for you to digest. So this concludes my summary of the draft agenda report. I, as well as Adam, Alex, Chris, and maybe even Keen, are available for questions.
Almost ran out of letters.
I almost did, I really did.
Priscilla, thank you so much. I think I can speak for everybody here. Your efforts and contribution to this is exceptional, and thank you so much. And for you to be able to put a robust amount of information into a presentation that's as concise as could be and detailed as possible is a true help to these proceedings. So thank you so much. Before I turn it over to the committee, it's probably best and appropriate to open up public comment to see if there's any people via online that have wished to speak to the committee today, or if they've pre-submitted any comments as well. So Tammy, do you have anything on your
I did
end?
not receive any pre-comments.
No pre-comments, and do we have any live comments or members of the public wishing to speak?
Yes, Hayden Hamilton.
Hayden Hamilton,
Yes, Adam, I'm here. Can you hear me?
we can hear you. Please proceed.
Thank you. First of all, Adam, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the LAFCO staff and for all the efforts that they've made to prepare this report. the hours that they've spent wading through all the minutia and the hundreds of pages that have been submitted by the parties is greatly appreciated. We don't necessarily agree with everything in the document. We do believe that for the most part, it represents an honest attempt to present the facts to help the commissioners reach a fair and equitable solution. The report acknowledges that the County Water Authority Act is the governing document, which does not specify an exit fee. LAFCO believes that it has the authority to set an exit fee and has proposed 3 options, as was discussed earlier. Essentially, a detachment with an exit fee, a delay in decision of 2 years until LAFCO has an opportunity to perform a MSR on the County Water Authority, and then to deny the applications. We believe that these considerations for the commission also ought to present one additional option, which is the detachment with no exit fee. That option would conform to the letter of the law as found in the County Water Authority Act. It doesn't preclude them from choosing another option, but I believe that option should at least be presented to them as one for consideration. While we're not particularly happy with the detachment with exit fee, it does represent the least painful of the proposed options and allows us to move to the next step after 3 years of haggling over terms and conditions. The option to delay the decision is untenable and has a number of issues that need to be considered. Any delay increases the negative economic impact on North County agricultural and businesses. So a delay is potentially catastrophic on an already stressed activity. It also represents an additional potentially $15 million in cost to North County ratepayers. And if we consider the proposed County Water Authority rate increases, actually makes that probably more than $15 million. Should this option be pursued, we think that these losses should be factored into any future exit fee determination. Otherwise, you're penalizing RMWD and FPUD ratepayers because of not having enough data. And the reality is we believe the MSR won't really provide any significant impact on the detachment issues. We also have an additional concern in that, based on our own experiences with the detachment applications, we're not confident that this work will be completed in 2 years, particularly considering that the County Water Authority strenuously objected to being subject to an MSR when they were added to the schedule last summer. Should that be a reality, then we're looking at even a further negative impact on the economics of the North County. And with that, I'll conclude my statement.
Hayden, thank you so much for your comments and participation. Erica, are there any other members of the public that are online wishing to speak?
No others.
So no others. And seeing none in the room, we'll close public comment and turn it over to you guys as committee members. This is your opportunity for any Q&A to staff, any comments, any feedback, any specific recommendations, whether it be individual or collective. So yeah, let me turn it over to you guys. Kim?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. The roll-up calculations on page 25 that got us to the 9%, does that take into account that the agencies that are rolling off still pay IAC fixed charges? Did you calculate a per acre foot roll-off, or did you calculate a percentage of the cost, because they would still be paying IAC and fixed charges?
Yeah.
So essentially what we did is we took the information that was provided to Survey Ford the last 2 weeks ago now, that had the schedule of the calendar of water reuse projects coming online. and then use the calculation provided by Dr. Hanneman in terms of the net revenue loss, which is about $940,000 per acre foot. Excuse me, $940,000 per acre foot, and then use that as the basis for providing analysis over the term of the last project coming online.
Was that, I can't recall, was the Hanneman analysis per acre foot for detaching?
No, it was
completely?
940,000 per 1,000 acre feet a year. If they lose 1,000 acre feet, the water authority loses.
million bucks.
Just
That's what
that.
he said.
Okay,
That's
all
what
right,
his calculation is.
all right.
The net
And thank you for the net revenue calculation. I asked for that last time and it was very helpful. Let's see, page 29 has estimated the detachment impacts of about 12.6 million. And then as I'm reading the revised exit fee, it's about 4.8 million, which kind of, and I understand that you're discounting it for the pump station. But what that does is it puts the water authority in a negative $8 million a year revenue for the first 5 years. And I think it kind of is a deficit situation for the first 5 years by giving that discount immediately on the exit fee. And I don't know if there's anything to do about that, but if you're saying that the impacts are 12.5, the first 5 years is when basically they're I want to say eating that full 40 million in that 5-year time frame. And then the last one, and this is just a general comment, is the blue section on page 31 at the bottom says that the detachments will generate a negative financial impact, but they're less than significant relative to other day-to-day cost of living and inflation. I also think when you take the effects of detachment and you compound it with inflation and you compound it with the cost of living and then you compound it with the roll-offs, all of those things combined are significant, which is why I actually like option Y. And I know Mr. Hamilton did not because it was a delay, but I think looking at everything holistically and comprehensively is going to benefit the whole region at the end of the day. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Kim.
May I ask
Yeah.
a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Related to what.
Floor's
Kim
open to you
did,
guys.
And I think it was item C, when you were providing the overview for, so when you were talking about the separate impacts of roll-off on the 3 projects, Two-Creek Water and East County Advanced Water versus detachment. Was there, did you, if you went over this, I apologize if I missed it, sort of a cumulative net impact in percentage terms of both detachment and roll-off?
So 9.4% increase to ratepayers, and then for the reuse projects, and a 2.5% increase to ratepayers with respect to the detachments.
I want to let everybody else
Okay.
speak first, I don't realize, complain that I talk too much. But yeah, and I think that, Brian, that's good to add those up. Right now, the Water Authority is proposing a 14% rate increase, as I know Nick's very well aware of, for next calendar year. So to put it in perspective, over that whole period of time, 11, 12% is against 1 year, next year coming up at that amount. And Kim's thoughts on the North County pump stations. I think the opinion of those of us in the north who've been paying for those stations for the last 25 years and still don't have them, and the 25 or plus $1 million we've put in for Rainbow alone into the ESB and the storage and supply reliability projects is problematic. And at the last month's board meeting, the Valley Center UEMA project just got approved, and there was this discussion that happened there as the board was discussing it about the fact that this penny's already been paid. We've already paid for those things, not 100% of it. So to say that, yeah, well, it's 40 million, they're going to get credited too quickly. There's a different perspective, those of us who've been paying for decades and haven't received it. I think that, and Hayden Hamilton is the chair of our board at Rainbow, if all you didn't know that. But one of the comments he made, and that, we've been at this for 3 years already, well, 4. I mean, Sandy and I had breakfast in May of 2019, if you remember that day, when we first told her about this. So it's been 4 years already. And one of the impacts that the Water Authority's pointed out, the difference between roll-off and detachment, is that roll-off is a planning thing. They can see out in their 5-year planning horizon, they see what's coming, and even someone further out to 2030, they see what's coming, and so they can adjust as they go. And so now we're coming on the 4-year anniversary of the Water Authority being notified our intention to do this. And then obviously some of you recall the history. We spent the latter part of 2019 trying to sort it out with the Water Authority, meeting with member agencies, before finally filing an application with LAFCO in early 2020. And so if we do choose the option, I always say why about option Y and delay through an MSR, and I don't disagree as a part-time LAFCO practitioner, an MSR for the Water Authority would be a useful exercise, but I think that it will take at least 24 months to get it done. And then, you know, the impacts, the negative impacts that we filed and started this process with the Water Authority 4 years ago get extended even further. And Dr. Hanneman said it, nothing should go beyond 10 years, you know, because that's just unreasonable, and as short as 3. So the Water Authority's been on notice since 2019 that this is a possibility, and hope has been factored in their planning. And after 3 years of a formal process, one of the options is put up there with a 5-year exit fee, which would make an 8-year total window they've got. But if we do another series of undefined extensions based on an MSR, this could go to 10, 11, maybe 12 years if it goes bad. So what I would suggest and hope that LAFCO could ask the commission to consider is that should option Y be selected, you guys set that up for me. You set that one up for me. But if should option Y be considered by the commission, then and with, you know, an option with an exit fee starting right now, those should be joined in that the timeline for the Water Authority planning purposes on financial impact should start at the same time. So don't sit there and say, all right, if the board chooses to allow detachment with exit fee, that 5 year starts at whatever the effective date of the detachment would be after all the other processes. But if we got to wait 2 years to go through an MSR, then if the commission was to choose to an option with an exit fee, then we've got another 5 years on top of that, which then, you know, you've got well beyond Dr. Hanneman's recommendation for planning purposes of the Water Authority. So we would suggest that it might be appropriate for, if option Y is selected, to condition it such that should the commission in the future approve detachment, that those 2 years would be rolled into the exit fee calculation for the total contribution, so that we don't end up paying the increased rates and then having to pay an exit fee again, because at the end of the day, the whole process of exit fees allow the Water Authority to plan the rates and budgets as going forward.
Well, Jack said we didn't use all the letters, so we were just continuing the theme with X, Y, and Z.
I see.
So
I have a number of comments I'd like to make, and
Please, Sandy.
if you can please bear with me, because as you know, I might have a little bit of detail. So, so I want to start off with first, I want to thank Priscilla and Adam for the work that you've done in trying to understand this very complicated issue. I think when this first came to us, it was said, oh, this is simple, it can just be done and there's no big deal. And clearly it's not. Water is a very complicated issue. We are a regional planning agency, just like Sandag is a regional planning agency for transportation issues. These issues cross all of the jurisdiction within San Diego County. And very thankfully, because of the planning done at the Water Authority, we have sufficient water in the region. And that was not the case for MWD over this last year, where they cut back 6 million of their 19 million population to health and safety water for a period of a year. Due to the rains that just came, those things have been lifted, but that is a short-term situation for a lack of long-term investment in supply reliability. I want to touch on a couple of things. Want to comment on what Tom just said about our proposed rate increase. The board of directors directed me to come 2 months early to them with initial rates and charges for the next year. We do not have all of the data. We will have a series of 10 meetings over the next 2 months to go through our budgets and rates. Those rates will come down based on more data available. And I know Tom knows that. I just want to make sure this group is aware that because we have lack of information, we haven't completed the water year, we cannot say what the rates are today with certainty. So they're draft rates. So I want to go back to a couple of things. Number one is that I feel like the list of affected agencies is woefully inadequate. I think all of the member agencies of the San Diego County Water Authority, all 24 are affected because you're voting to increase their rates. And I think it's very important they be engaged and notified on this as well. I want to say that while the $2.20 per household may seem like a low number, we frankly think it is low. It's not accurate, but having said that, it is meaningful. And to Kim's point, it's not just about this, it's about you're going to have inflationary cost increases with this on top of that. And to a person who can't afford to put food on the table, $2.20 makes a difference. Maybe none of us in this room experience that, but it is something that our constituents experience. The where it says on page 18 that services should be completely cut off, Metropolitan maintains that it could repair within 14 days. We've seen no analysis of that. We've asked for it. It's very hard to believe if a major pipeline into the water authority was cut off that they could repair it within 14 days. So I think it would be appropriate to provide that analysis. The applicants have said they will pay Eastern $1,195 for every acre foot of wholesale treated water delivered. We're not sure where that number came from. Rainbow is going to pay the rate at Metropolitan plus $11. The current rate at Metropolitan is $1,209 plus an $11 service fee. That gets you to $1,220 per acre feet. With regard to the exit fee, was really based only on the QSA obligations for the water authority. It was not based on all of the contractual obligations, including the Carlsbad desalination plant, which these agencies sat and voted for in our boardroom as investments made on behalf of all of the member agencies. The 5-year exit fee really would not cover these issues. Those windows are 30-year windows. And those commitments were made on everybody's behalf. I think it's also important to note that we all submitted the majority of our documents back in 2020. A lot has changed since that, not the least of which is we've been in the driest, hottest conditions on record. The analysis that has been done about vulnerability, about accessibility to water needs to be reviewed because clearly Met was not able to provide service to a good portion of its service area. And let's make no mistake, these agencies will be getting their water directly from Metropolitan. They will not get it from Eastern. Eastern does not have any physical ability to deliver that water to these two agencies. And so Met's reliability is critical in this regard. I think on page 22 of the report, in a quote from Adon Ortega, completely ignores two other key points that he made. And here are his quotes. The staff report cites an outdated letter by Metropolitan previous general manager and fails to consider recently experienced extreme shortage conditions on state water project supplies during 2022 and potentially coming shortages of Colorado River supplies in 2024 that are being weighed by the Metropolitan Board. Any additional demands on our state water project supplies are significant. I will remind you that the amount of water that Fallbrook and Rainbow take from Metropolitan that would come from the state water project is the same amount of money that the same amount of water that's been fought over for 40 years out of Mono Lake over environmental concerns. And to suggest that there's no environmental impact from that is quite concerning. The staff has now changed the ASP potential offset to almost 40 million on pages 30 and 36. And really, I just have to say, I think you're mixing apples and oranges. That expense is something that would be paid over 30 years. It's not a one-time expense that would be paid in 1 year. That cost has not been incurred, nor has it been charged to any of the agencies. The only thing that would affect this offset for the first 5 years of those debt payments, as we pointed out to the staff before, would be a small amount of debt service funding. And earlier comment letter, we told the staff the annual debt payment would be about 2.3 million, making the offset about 11+ million for 5 years. So we really have issue with that and would ask that you go back and take a look at it. The continuation of the property taxes is for purposes of bonding indebtedness. The actual text of the County Water Authority Act states that the payment shall be for the bonded and other indebtedness of the water authority. So it is not just for bonds, but for other indebtedness as well. Also, it's not just past property taxes, but a continued ability to increase the amount as needed. And we realize our lawyers disagree with Fallbrook and Rainbow on the meaning of the act, but LAFCO staff should not be just accept their assertion as accurate from our perspective. And then I will note that on page 37 on the State Water Project uses some incorrect data. Staff says that 16,320 acre foot is applicant's total water demand. However, that is not accurate. In the past 2 completed fiscal years, Rainbow and Fallbrook ordered from our agencies a combined 25,985 acre feet. Additionally, there still appears to have been no meaningful CEQA review on this increased state water project demand, particularly as to possible impacts on the environmental sensitive Bay Delta. Obviously, this has been a contentious issue because this agency as a regional body has planned on the behalf of the needs of the entire region. The Water Authority has supported ag through a reduced ag discount program. When Metropolitan discontinued those types of programs, the Water Authority picked it up. We've also advocated on behalf of the ag agencies, which also include other ag agencies, for funding, for innovative programs to come in and save trees as part of decarbonization, and find ways to provide additional funding to support those communities. But I would also point out that they also serve a substantial residential community, and that residential communities are going to be growing over time with development. And water cutbacks are not just about ag, they're also about residential customers. So the reliability is key and critical for those agencies going forward. And again, just want to end with, I really would appreciate going back and increasing the list of affected agencies, because I believe that that is a glaring hole, as these agencies are going to be taking on more costs of which they have not bargained for. And I guess the last comment I would make with regard to roll-off, we're going to need to go back and look at the financial analysis. I want to clarify something. This work group did not set up a work group to look at roll-off versus detachment. That was set up by Keen Simons. The membership was set up by Keen Simons, and they came out with a report. And so, you know, to say that this group has directed that, I think is disingenuous. But back to the issue of roll-off. As agencies develop local supplies, they're still committed and obligated to the Water Authority for the cost of those, the Water Authority system. The Water Authority provides the backup, and when those projects don't work or aren't available, everyone is going to be, you don't want to have one source of supply, just like we don't at the Water Authority. We have Met as a backup, we have our local supplies. And good regional planning in which this region is able to grow and thrive depend on that planning effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate all those comments. I mean, I took some notes, so we'll certainly evaluate those and contribute accordingly to the updating of the report. So, Jack?
Sure, I got a couple comments. So the ESP pump station. So I think I'm not clear how it gets so confusing, but the reality is there's a revenue impact of us leaving, which we get, and there's also a savings. It's a dollar savings, right? The water authority doesn't debt fund 100% of their CIP. So if they save that money, they can debt fund something else. Debt funding doesn't make the money go away. It's still $40 million that is saved. So if we stay, there's another $40 million I have to spend. So I agree with the approach LAFCO takes, the idea of saying, well, you could debt fund this and it should only be the debt fund payment. That really sort of creates this idea that, you know, everything on the CIP is debt funded, which isn't the case. Also, that project was envisioned as it was with just Valley Center, that it wasn't actually built by the water authority. They would actually pay Fallbrook and Rainbow the money to build it, right? And so I don't think you can debt fund something that you don't own. So that money would be money they would have had to transfer for the construction of it anyway. So I don't, that debt funding argument to me, I'm not quite following. You know, the rates, it's important to remember, I understand, and it's an easy target for Fallbrook and Rainbow to say, hey, we don't want to pay $1 more a month. The thing that I think people lose track of is rates in Fallbrook and Rainbow are very high, right? And why are they high? We're rural agencies, so we have a lot of infrastructure per customer, and we have high water rates from being in the water authority. And the worst situation as a water agency is to be rural with expensive water, right? And usually those agencies have to make reliability, water supply reliability versus cost decisions. But in our case, because we're part of the water authority, right, we are paying for desal. We were there and we voted against it, right? And the reason we voted against it is we said, hey, we can't afford desal in Fallbrook. Our rates cannot afford it. We've got a lot of infrastructure we need to do. We can't afford both. So as everyone talks about, oh, it impacts us $1, it's important to remember, look at what you're paying versus what people in Fallbrook are paying. And yeah, we do have disadvantaged communities in Fallbrook that are really struggling because they're paying much higher water rates. So I think that's a decision ultimately, the way this is written, that our ratepayers should be able to make, right? Do they want to pay more and stay in the water authority, or do they want to, you know, look at that reliability cost decision and move to Eastern? And that's really all we've been asking, is let them sort of decide on that. It also, when we look at the water authority, they can take steps, right? And so there are things they could do instead of just saying, hey, if our revenue goes down to them, everyone else has to deal with it. There are steps they can take with those supply contracts. When they entered into them, the world was different than what it is today. Demands are much lower than what they were projected back in the day. There are alternatives for them to be working with Med and Med member agencies to bring down and look at options for those supply costs. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one, you know, revenue goes down, they have no recourse except to pass on that to everyone else, which is the assumption we're making on both roll-off and detachment. And the reality is it's something that's going to have to happen regardless of you know, what happens with detachment, just due to water demands and what's happening with local supply development. And you know, on that front, you know, Fallbrook isn't going out after Pure Water San Diego, right? Because we say, oh, it's going to cost us money. It is a project we recognize City of San Diego needs to do. It makes sense, and you know, we support that, and we've been supportive of it. So in this case, it's a very similar aspect of, you know, us detaching. There's a cost impact, but it really makes the most sense for you know, Fallbrook not to pay for infrastructure we don't use. And you know, the other with water demand, it's good to look at the last 2 fiscal years, but then I think you should also look at this year if you want to look at that. So Fallbrook and Rainbow are very dependent on weather. I think what you're seeing is our demands now, the Fallbrooks are the lowest since they've been since probably the 1950s, and this is going to be one of our lowest water demand years ever. It also is a year in which we now have our local supply project coming online. So we're going to be looking at a couple thousand acre feet of water from the water authority. And so I think that demand and the impact of that on the big delta is really essentially minuscule. So I really appreciate all the time, you know, staff took in terms of analyzing this, and I'm hopeful we can kind of bring this to some end one way or the other, because the reality is for Fallbrook, we've got some big decisions. If we can't get rate relief, we've got some real challenges in terms of water affordability how do we continue to do everything we need to do going forward? So I'm hopeful, staff can move this to some sort of, and not push it out for another, 3-5 years to get through an MSR process for the water authority. I agree it needs to be done, but the reality is what happens in Fallbrook and Rainbow is somewhat independent of other issues within the water authority. And so I'm hopeful, both those processes can happen simultaneously.
Well, I want to echo the comments from everybody here about the staff work that's gone into this. Appreciate everybody's time. As I think as of today, that was the newest number here, but so I really had to do a deep dive into this process, the history of it. So again, I just appreciate the body of work that's been out there. Since the last time that we met, the city of San Diego has weighed in opposition to detachment. I think everybody here is aware of that. And really the crux of when we analyzed this issue was just about, I think fundamentally what we recognize at the city is a number of things that Jack just mentioned, but I think ultimately what we feel like is that in sort of this regional discussion, it's the wrong solution to a problem that's been brought forward. We take a look at some of the other bodies that serve regionally. You look at SANDAG, you look at MTS and whatnot, and there's always this sort of battle between North County and the more urban cities. But the answer to the question isn't to leave the table in the city's perspective. The answer to the question is to stay at the table. We have to find out how we can work together to make sure that everybody is served. Think about conversations at SANDAG surrounding some of the roads up in that area. And yes, I mean, it's been widely publicized about how those discussions went, but ultimately the cities are still a part of SANDAG. So I think for us, it's not really the answer to the problem that we're facing. As Tom indicated, there's been a conversation, at the Water Authority about water rates. There was the projected water rate increase that is coming forward. I would say that the elongated budget process is at the request of the city of San Diego to provide member agencies with a more transparent budget process that allows them to take things into consideration and maybe make adjustments for any potential rate increases. But it is still just an estimate. With that said, there is a complete and total acknowledgement from the board of directors and the leadership of the San Diego County Water Authority that rates are something that are front and center, that we have to work on and that we have to bring down. And so leadership has asked for options to bring down water rates, and that's going to be an ongoing discussion at the Water Authority. But to Ms. Thorner's point, which is my point as well, so thank you very much. Just in that, what we're talking about with the detachment being approved is an additional water rate increase or increase to the member agencies across the region, in addition to inflation, in addition to the projected roll-off and all of that. And point out, when it comes to roll-off and Pure Water and the city of San Diego, Pure Water is not expected to come online until 2035. And we've notified the Water Authority long before that this was going to happen, which enables the authority to better plan for when they need to make these adjustments so that we don't have a severe spike in rates. So I would just put that on the table as a little bit of a degree of difference. I did have one question for staff that I wanted to raise about Metropolitan and the vote apportionment there that could potentially be moving to Riverside if this is approved. What were the 3 votes that you all analyzed?
So 2 of them were essentially procedural,
Okay.
and then the third one was for the appointment to the general manager.
Right. Okay. For the members of the public who are listening to this, I want us to submit that with the historic relationship that has been between the Water Authority and Metropolitan Water District, the vote for the general manager, as indicated, was a significant vote. And what we are anticipating is that as we move forward with the new leadership at Metropolitan, as the water world continues to have to battle with some of these issues with regard to water supplies, and a lot of the work that Metropolitan is going to have to do to make themselves as resilient as San Diego, I can't sit here and say that it's in the best interest for San Diego County to be ceding any vote share to Metropolitan Water District in Los Angeles County. I don't think that's in San Diego's best interest. And that was part of the city of San Diego's letter in opposition to this, was because we shouldn't be ceding any power to Metropolitan. And I'm being very candid and very honest about that, because we need to make sure that we're being served down here. And so I recognize that, as we indicated in the mayor's letter on this issue, the spirit in which folks, wanted to submit their applications to detach. But ultimately, I'm going to end where I began. I think it's the wrong solution to the issues that have been raised by the water districts. I think there are solutions, as Jack indicated, that I think we can look at, and that the leadership of the water authority is committed to looking at, because ultimately we need to make sure that we're delivering affordable water to the people that we serve. And I think this action, approving detachment, does not accomplish that. But I do think that there are steps that we can take, working together and actually coming to the table to actually look at those solutions that can make a difference for everybody. So I'll do my comments.
Thank you, Nick. Lydia?
So I'm one of the few people that are not a water person or have done water. So this was a very interesting process. And I have to say, again, my hats off to staff who's done a really good job on trying to dissect the situation, especially making it very easy for somebody who doesn't do water day in and day out. I'm a city manager of a small city, and our issues are, not as tough as detachment. But what I want to say is breaking up is hard to do. And there's a fairness that needs to happen with this detachment. And there's a fairness to all of the ratepayers that are part of the authority. There is fairness to the ratepayers of Rainbow-Fallbrook that we want to detach and think that they can go somewhere else to get a better deal. And I think the staff did a really good job of trying to dissect those breakup issues to make it as fair as possible. It will never, ever be fair. It won't, one side is always going to feel jilted over the other side. And with that, I do support actually the first recommendation, I think the recommendation X, opposed to recommendation Y, because I think waiting for such a long period of time, again, it is just a delay. And at this point, being part of an organization that had to detach at a smaller rate, it was easier to rip off the Band-Aid and then deal with the issues at hand that we need to deal with as ratepayers for the rest of the board. I think is where we should be looking at and should be going. It's been a long process. 2019 is a very long process. I know in the water world, you guys look 20, 30 years out, but this is really a long process for even government work. We need to at least rip off the Band-Aid and allow it to move forward.
Thank you, Lydia.
So I don't feel like really have a lot of meaningful comments to add to this discussion, but as an Eastern representative, I do want to say that over the last number of years, I too agree. I think this has been a very long, thorough, exhaustive process, and a lot of effort's gone in. I think LAFCO staff has just done a tremendous job. I know we've communicated, they've reached out to Eastern to get more detail, more clarification. We've tried to support wherever we can, and that's been Eastern's position from the get-go. It's been very simple position. We've been very clear is that we're supportive of the process. We're supportive of LAFCO's process. We're supportive of LAFCO and their needs for data and information from Eastern. But we've also been very clear from the beginning that Eastern is and was, and we've communicated that we're indifferent to the outcome. We're really looking to this body, to LAFCO and the staff to do its analysis and determine what is the best option for the San Diego community as a whole. So we have been supportive, fairly silent, only when we needed to provide some information. But I do want to share that I think that there's been a lot of really good effort to bring this discussion to this point. And again, if there's anything more that we can do as a part of this conversation, we're happy to do that. But we're indifferent to the end result.
Thanks, Nick. And the feeling's mutual. I appreciate you and your staff for all the exchanging of information and communication throughout this entire process. So thank you.
You're indifferent.
Adam, you mentioned on the other two votes that Met, they were procedural. Met doesn't really have 50-50 votes on procedural issues. So can we get the specifics?
Yeah, we're continuing to evaluate that information. We can provide those specifics to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, more than happy to do that.
And I would also just say, to a comment that Jack made about look at our demands this year, we wouldn't do planning based on a 1 year wet year, just like we wouldn't do planning based on a 1 year dry year. Infrastructure for water takes many, many years. Like, Jack, is your groundwater project up and running?
Yeah,
It's delivering,
yeah,
so.
yeah. And actually, they're obligated 6,000 acre feet next year.
Yeah.
Which our total demand this year is going to be about 7,500. So.
Well, I think to Jack's comments, it was include this year, not
Yeah,
just look
well,
at it.
because you suggested 2 extremely dry years. So I'm saying if we're going to look at it, like you said, we need to take dry and wet years. So you'll see our demands drop in wet years significantly and come up in dry years.
Which is why I think the working group came to five years, because that rolling average kind of accumulates both dry and wet years.
Yeah, and Rainbow, 20 years ago, less than 20 years, we were selling 35,000 acre feet. We're gonna be lucky to hit 13,000 acre feet. So this year, so, 2/3 of the demand we used to have in water authority is already gone. We roll off. We didn't voluntarily roll off. We didn't get a new supply, but the cost of water just put so many groves out of business. And if prices keep going up the way they are, we'll be down selling 6,000 acre a year in 10 years. So the impact, net revenue loss of water authority will be lower than what is forecast using those 5-year look back numbers.
Mel, there's a lot to digest here. I know you're the newest member, and I'm sure you've been paying attention from afar before today.
Definitely paying attention.
Do you have any questions or comments, or?
No, I thought the report out by the staff was excellent. On behalf of, being chair of the County Water Authority, I, believe in, what our general manager just said and what Nick Serrano, who's been on this committee longer than me. It's interesting when you listen to the chair of Rainbow speak and talk about a fourth alternative. I think the fourth alternative could be for staff to recommend and this committee to recommend that Fallbrook, Rainbow, and the County Water Authority sit down at the table and come up with an agreement. We've heard from Jack, we've heard from Tom, that it's all about water and water cost. We've also heard that their demand is way down. We've also heard Jack say the world is very different today than it was 4 years ago when we sat down. It's going to be so different looking at Met's costs, Met's investments in the future, water supply, what Rainbow and Fallbrook needs. I think it would be beneficial to this entire region for the San Diego County Water Authority and Fallbrook and Rainbow to sit down at the table and come up with a solution.
We're ready today, just like we were in May of 2019.
I think that echoes your comments at the Special Districts Advisory Committee.
It's
been a common theme through this whole process.
Give us a call.
And Tom, you've seen there's different leadership at the Water Authority, and I think that should be one of the alternatives.
Yeah, you're the third board chair to oversee this process.
What I would hopefully suggest on that front is, this is moving forward to the commission. There's nothing that prevents us, and we've been saying since the beginning, we're always happy to sit down and talk about it. It was the Water Authority who told us that submit an application first, and then we can talk about it in more detail. That was always open for discussion. So we're still open for discussion. Now, I think the options become more and more limited as we've invested all the time and resources to get to the point we're in. But, that said, I'm still happy, we're still happy. Our ability to, get our boards on board with something is less and less given the time frame that's been there. But I'm still happy anytime to come down and talk about it. I think one of the
Maybe they can come up with it.
Yeah,
Some dead
half
grows.
way.
Ryan, do you want to play musical chairs? Maybe like.
I don't know how to get there now. Yeah. The other challenge that's out there, just to be forward on it, is that we have very different perspectives, right? So the Water Authority is envisioning that they've made these investments and their rates will be less than Met's. That's the Water Authority's position right now. So theoretically, we're making a bad bet because if we stayed, our costs would be lower. That's not the perspective we have on where things are going. So, having that discussion is important to kind of maybe understand we're starting in different spaces in terms of what we think the Water Authority needs to do and where they should be going versus what you're going to suggest, but I'm happy to, have that discussion. The other item that came up today that I think is important is we talk about these votes in Metropolitan and San Diego County. Fallbrook and Rainbow are not planning to leave San Diego County, right? We're just changing our wholesale supplier to be with Eastern. There's no reason into the future that our voices and having some of our ratepayers now vote for someone at Eastern. There can't be Eastern and the Water Authority being on the same side of issues of Fallbrook and Rainbow being able to voice some of those views at Eastern. The future of Med is not going to work if we're deciding big issues by 0.5% of vote. It just isn't. Bay Delta, all these issues, if we're getting 0.5%, it's going to get overturned the next time. So that perspective of like we're battling and we're going to win it by 0.5% at Met, regionally, that's just going to end up in poor planning and water supply failure for all of us. So I think the idea, if we think that future depends on this 0.3%, then we're in a lot more trouble than worrying about the detachment of Fallbrook and Rainbow.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, that as the assessed valuation grows in your agencies, that percentage increases, and that does as well. I would also say that as put in our submittal back in 2020, Eastern has historically been opposed to what the Water Authority is doing, so that the more that we pay, the less that they pay. And it's all documented. I don't need to go into it. So I think there's, we clearly do have different perspectives about what the future looks like. And that presents some challenges moving forward, but we can always talk. I think that for the conversations that we had, it was, we don't need to pay anything and we can leave, and that's that. And so that really isn't a conversation. If there's willingness to go beyond that at this point, then maybe conversations can be had. And Adam, now did the cities took a vote, right, with regard to this, and what was their vote?
The city's advisory committee,
Mhm.
they voted to oppose the detachment.
Okay, and did the special
They
district?
took no action.
Okay.
It was heavily divided.
Yeah, and not so that we keep going back and forth, but there's a couple things there. One is, yes, we disagree about the future of the Water Authority, but also probably about Fallbrook and Rainbow, because the assessed valuation goes up relative to all of Southern California, right? So unless we think Fallbrook and Rainbow are going to grow more than the rest of Southern California, that voting percentage doesn't change. And so I think there's different perspectives in terms of what Fallbrook and Rainbow are going to look like if you live in Fallbrook and Rainbow versus some of the other areas. And then we never, in back to the early days of negotiation, we never said our position is we pay nothing and that's it. We did come forward with different, and we have the paperwork where we said, hey, talk about rolling off as others do. We proposed a number of different options. It's in writing stuff that we put forward that said, hey, here's some other things to consider early in the day. So we did have other things that we laid out there earlier. We said, this is what we think the act says, but that wasn't, we said, this is it, take it or leave it. That was never the case.
Brian, I know you had a question, and not to put a spotlight on you, but do you have any additional comments or thoughts? Just I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to at least lay their mindset on the table.
I appreciate it. I'm the other sort of independent member, and my thoughts align with Lydia's. I think, as a representative of the county, we're a participant in one of the reuse projects. Like we're a large consumer, so the impacts are going to be up or down depending on whichever way this goes. I also appreciate staff's work, and I'll just add Dr. Hahnemann to that, because that gentleman spent countless hours with me bringing it down to a level that I could understand, and I appreciate that. But my view has not changed a whole lot since the very beginning. Some of the numbers spinning through my head have, but I think that there's a balance here. These agencies have the opportunity at some point in time to do what they need to do for their ratepayers. And there should be consideration and fairness of what the impacts are on the rest of us. And what it comes down to is, what is that point in between?
Thank you. Anything more, Kim?
I do.
Yep, go ahead.
You can read it.
Yeah, I can see it in your eyes.
So I originally came out with option Y, but I want to echo Chair Katz that the parties working something out. I remember when Diane Jacobs referred this to this committee, the entire purpose was for the parties to come together and work something out. That has not happened, and time is getting short to make it happen. So I definitely echo Chair Katz and trying to find a way to work this out. I think that's better for the region. So that is my preferred alternative to option Y. But then I also heard Lydia talk about fairness for those of us that are remaining. And Sandy talked about the pump station being debt financed over 30 years. And I think that was my point that I was making earlier, is that would be a 30-year impact, but we're giving the credit over 5 years. And so the impact on the water authority is great during that first 5 years. Maybe an alternative in option X is that the entire 5-year exit fee be paid up front in order to leave. And then that way the water authority has cash on hand to mitigate the roll-off. Just throwing that out there as an idea.
Because we're sitting on big piles of
Yeah.
cash.
You're-
You
We're all
can debt
gonna-
finance your exit fee.
Yeah, who's gonna bond debt finance, an exit fee?
But you
How do
could,
how do
at
you
the
get-
water authority, you could debt finance something else,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So it's the same argument.
yeah, and if you look at a water authority budget of gonna be $850 million a year, and you're talking 12 million, it's like, this isn't gonna it's not gonna tilt the thing either way. It's not gonna be-
Well, you guys run the risk. There are 3 options out there and you don't know which one staff's gonna recommend. You don't know which one LAFCO is going to approve. That's why I think Chair Katz's option is the best one.
You know, we've been, and if you want to go back to that, we've been, like Jack said, since the summer of 2019, been open to that. We did have Keith Lewinger and I think Eric Heidemann were appointed to a committee. We had one meeting. That was it. That was about 2 years ago, I think. And so we've been open and saying consistently to LAFCO and everyone else. I told the commission this prior to even filing the application. We're open to sit down and work it out. I've said it many times. I'm probably quoting in the minutes saying I don't want to put a burning paper bag of detachment on LAFCO's porch, but it takes 2 to tango.
Yeah, and just remember that committee, the detachment negotiation committee, met, we finally had a call, and what they said is, we came up with a number of suggestions in that call of things to consider, number of them, that weren't all detachment, number of items. What they came back with is, we will help you secure low interest loans or grants for your infrastructure needs, which I think is already something they were doing for us, I thought. And so that was the call, and that was the only meeting, and obviously our boards didn't take that offer to be very viable so, again, we're happy to do it. We've been doing it, but I don't think we should delay anything because nothing's come of it over the last 3 years.
That's a question.
Sure.
Chair, I just wanted to clarify. Were you proposing that LAFCO deny the application and ask the parties to consult each other, or were you saying LAFCO postpone your decision on the application and have the parties consult each other?
The water authority and myself are opposed to detachment. So that option, as far as one of the 3 that were listed there, is nothing that we would agree with. We would agree with the no, we would agree with the Tom's why, and we would agree with this alternative that I just suggested, that LAFCO basically say, sit down at the table and work this out. But I'm all in favor of sitting down at the table and working this out before this even goes that far.
Right. Like just because LAFCO has to make a decision on the application itself, it doesn't have any control over the parties meeting. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on the application itself. Were you proposing?
You have the commitment from myself and Nick as 2 of the 3 officers to sit down at the table and.
I mean, we have
work
2
this
months
out.
until the commission
Yeah.
hearing. I mean, I'm hearing both parties saying they're willing to sit down and talk, and nothing is
Amen.
prohibiting you from
We're-
doing
we're-
so.
we're
And so
ready.
I would encourage,
And
We're ready to
LAFCO
do
can't
so.
force.
yeah, I mean, I would still encourage you to have this
I don't want to
conversation.
derail the schedule here. It's been a
No,
long time coming to get to this.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying there's still opportunity to have talks before the commission hearing in June. I mean, it's 2 months away. You can still have talks and you could still be at the same disagreement that you are today. But at least you can go into the hearing and say, we've had talks.
Can I just ask a question, Lydia? You said your perspective, are you representing the cities or Lemon Grove?
I know I'm representing myself, so not the city of Lemon Grove.
No, I mean, are you representing the special cities committee on this group? And the cities voted 10-1 to oppose detachment.
Right, and I wasn't at that meeting, so I didn't hear what the cities have done. And I've got to look to Keene, but I don't think I was the sole representative of that group. I was a voice in the city's group.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this is where it's the challenge for me as the moderator to kind of channel us in the direction. I think we've got all our individual comments and positions on the table. So I could at least perhaps entertain a more formal recommendation that perhaps is out there amongst the options that we've presented. And should none of that be presented, I think that would maybe conclude our meeting with the administrative record noting everybody's comments, positions accordingly as individuals.
Yeah, and if you're gonna try to get some sort of vote, that maybe that everyone who's a member agency of the Water Authority should not vote in such a way.
And
We'll leave it at-
perhaps maybe the holistic, comprehensive, whether it's a vote or a head nod, or is to at least, sounds like you can give us some feedback that this report, whether there is some disagreement to among parties, but it is presented in a way, just as we kind of voted on the Hanneman analysis, that this report is concluded with information that would provide the commission with an informed decision.
Subject to comments.
Absolutely. Keane, did you have anything to say?
I did, and just for the benefit of thanking all of you, many of you have been on probably, 10 meetings so far. Mr. Katz being somewhat new to this most recent and final perhaps meeting. I did want to emphasize, as Adam was mentioning, what we really want to know from all of you, and you all represent your individual perspective, but bringing it through your agency home, is A, do the three options we identify, are they reasonable? And if you had collective wisdom in supporting one over the other, well, then let's hear it. Barring that, I certainly would benefit from understanding and getting a pulse of the committee, collectively or by individuals, if you believe, as Adam was referencing, has staff reasonably exhausted the analysis, and whatever the decision of the commission may be, they have an informed document before them. Said another way, is there a glaring blind spot that a committee member here wants to go on record, and it will go on record saying this wasn't addressed, and we're not talking about disagreement, saying this item was not addressed at all. Those comments collectively will inform staff recommendation that will be made by the end of next week. We'll go out. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll start. I want to be clear that I do not think the report is complete. I've noted several areas that I think need to be addressed. I would be willing to say we've received the report, and I would vote no on detachment.
And then I'll just add on to that, I think there was a couple things that I could point out, the Met votes being one of them, that sounded like needed some follow-up for some inclusion in here. I mean, going back to something that Ms. Thorner began this meeting with, as the city of San Diego, I have a hard time sitting here talking about rate increases being considered less than significant. I understand the analysis that was done, but that certainly just from a perspective of just, you know, with the public in mind, a $2 increase, a $1 increase to families out there, I don't know how I can stomach sort of me voting in favor of a document that says that it's less than significant. I don't think that we have the ability to say that with any real certainty. And so that is really sits really difficult for me to have that. So the follow-ups coupled with, the notion that an increase like that, if detachment is approved, is less than significant, coupled with the city of San Diego's perspective that detachment should be opposed. I think therefore we would not conclude that the two other options are reasonable. I also wanted to mention on the exit fee bit, one thing that I do know with the exit fee is that while 5 years has been proposed, at the end of 5 years, we don't know what comes of that. That is, in my opinion, that's a very short runway. I go back to when the city of San Diego announced its Pure Water project. The fact that Pure Water and its roll-off will happen in 2035, we're in 2023. There's a very significant runway to that. So with those things in mind, I don't think I could vote in support of saying that this is something that is fine.
But just for the benefit, because I know our commission will ask this question, Nick, would there be an alternative measurement of significant or less than significant staff should be focusing in on? We've used inflation. What would be perhaps an alternative?
I think that's what it really comes down to, in my opinion, is, I would say what people are paying right now. I mean, I don't know if that's been a measurement that's been done, but what I can tell you is that from what I've heard at the city of San Diego, what I continue to hear at the city of San Diego, what I continue to hear at the San Diego County Water Authority is that people are having difficulty paying their water bills. People are having difficulty paying the other inflationary costs that are there. And I think the notion that we would call it less than significant and decide that this is something that is, reasonable for the ratepayers of this region, and then I guess by another condition of the report, not allowing all the member agencies of the region being able to have a say in this. That's difficult. Appreciate the question.
Well, just to follow up on my good friend Nick's comments there, the Pure Water project, at least according to your website, has 33,000 acre feet a year coming online sometime in 2025. So this isn't out in the 2030s. There's going to be much more water rolled off in the next couple of years than detachment. As a matter of fact, with option Y, it might even precede our detachment. So, that's a thing. And I think that one thing that's important, you note on the revised thing, the impact on option X is 0. So it's not significant with the recommended. Now, we're not in favor of exit fees, but when the exit fee, irrespective of how you calculate the $40 million credit, whatever, that's a lot of money that we're going to be paying for even less services than we get today. And so the impact for everybody for 5 years is nothing, and it gives Water Authority a chance to plan, as you said. And the impact total of detachment is much less than the ultimate impact of Pure Water. And so, I think it's and our board chair sent a letter to Mayor Gloria along these lines. It's a little bit hypocritical to say that, yeah, I know we're having this thing, but you can't. And so the law allows our boards to do this, both within the County Water Authority Act and CKH. LACCO's trying to administer this thing. We don't agree with an exit fee, but when somebody says, I'm opposed attachment because it's going to impact my ratepayers, when their impact is 0 in the near term, rings hollow to me. So.
I just want to make sure I have a clear understanding of what the question is before the body. Is it, or rather, the question is to Keen, really. Keen, are you asking the parties to identify issues that were not addressed rather than identifying issues that they disagree with? Was that
correct? I think we've heard what is being disagreed at. Are there topics that are material that we have not yet covered? I think we've exhausted it, but for example, Kim's observation about, well, what about an upfront exit fee payment to account for, the proportionality of the discount? That's a new topic that we hadn't talked about. And it triggered my question to the committee as you went around engaging.
I would add that CEQA has not been addressed.
Well, on that point, both our agencies did adopt CEQA findings as part of the initial approval of the applications. those findings were challenged, and the findings included our determination, there is no impact to Bay Delta. They were challenged. The Otay Water District, who was led by the former chair of the Water Authority, sued both agencies. And that's what ended up with a stipulated judgment that was referred to in the report. That judgment included that the CEQA process was valid. So, the CEQA, when you do CEQA and you get challenged, there's a certain period of challenge CEQA determinations. And after that period is over, then you don't get another bite at the apple. So, you can say all you want that you think it hasn't been done, but according to the law and what LAFCO council has appropriately reviewed, it has been done. So
I think we just disagree because the court decision said it did not apply to this analysis. And so I can't get into the legal discussion about it, but clearly it has not been dealt with from our perspective.
And if I may,
Sure.
on behalf of Fallbrook Public Utility District, we have submitted, and the same applies for Rainbow. We have submitted a legal opinion as to the very issue that this girl just raised. And it's in the record on the posted on the website.
Again, the point being that LAFCO has not dealt with the CEQA.
With all due respect, I don't think we want to get into any legal proceedings today. So
Yeah.
both comments from both parties are duly noted and will be a part of the administrative record to notarize that.
And the only caution I appreciate Nick's perspective from the city of saying, hey, we don't want to have to pay any more, in our rates. I think if you're going to dig into this sort of rate equity across the water authority, it gets very complicated very quickly. And what you see is back in the day, rates were funded largely from property tax, and they've shifted over time to be on water use. And so what that has done is shift costs away from areas like the city of San Diego to areas like Fallbrook and Rainbow. That sort of leaves us with our only option at this point because we're a small part of the water authority. We don't have much say in what happens with rates. The only option that exists to us is really what's under the act is to finally say, hey, this isn't working for us anymore. This structure isn't set. So if you're going to go back into that rate thing, then I think you also need to look at how have these costs shifted? What are individuals in Fallbrook and Rainbow paying, on a monthly basis versus what are individuals in the city of San Diego paying? What are low-income individuals in Fallbrook paying versus low-income individuals in the city of San Diego? So I'm happy to think that dialogue is important, but I think we need to look at it regionally instead of just individual agency. I get it. No agency wants to pay anymore. I got that. But there's also this bigger issue of what is really fair to all these individuals. And so I think that if we have that, if you want to include that discussion, then I think it's got to include all that information.
Well, I would just go back to sort of what I said, and what we indicated in our letter, which is more or less the real position of the city, which is that, we continue to believe that having discussions like that are important. It's what I think the openness that you heard from Chair Katz and myself is all really about. It's just this continued notion that we understand that there's regional challenges. And so as a regional body, let's address those challenges in a regional perspective. And so I think it involves, I will go back to, the fourth alternative and that being put on the table, and I reiterate my support for it, because again, I gotta believe that there is some sort of solution that can be worked out with the parties sitting down and really trying to get into those kinds of details and, getting, creative on what we can do here. Because ultimately, that's why the authority is set up.
Yeah, I'm just saying the issue falls back to the same position you have now, which is costs would have to shift back to the city of San Diego, which is the main reason they're opposed to detachment in the first place. So we're going to end up in this situation where we're in a position that costs go back on the city of San Diego.
Yeah.
The city of San Diego controls the votes at the water authority. We're not, that position is going to come full circle, even if we stay.
I feel like that's one perspective. I don't feel like that's just all perspectives that are there. I think you mentioned earlier in some of your comments, some other options that, personally I've thought of like, we need to play out those scenarios to see what those look like, given what we know the future of water is looking like right now. And to make the point again about, when this process started, the world was very different. And I think that informs a lot of why the parties need to come back to the table to try and have a meaningful dialogue.
Like we said, we're happy that probably this isn't the format where we make much progress.
I'm gonna get you guys to meet, so.
Well, there's a bar down the street. We just go there right now.
I'm ready.
And Keith, to address your question about the report, what Nick was just saying, how things are so different now than when this was first introduced 4 years ago. I would like to see the report go into what this detachment would do to the ratepayers in Fallbrook and Rainbow, knowing how things are different in the last 4 years and what kind of investments Net is going to be doing, and what has happened with Net in the last year with the drought going on. So, they're ratepayers that did not get water. How much is their investment going to cost Eastern and therefore going to cost Rainbow and Fallbrook? What is going to be the impact to the ratepayers?
I think that, and I appreciate that, Mel, but I think that to try to hypothesize on what may or may not happen or decisions some governing board may or may not make in the future and apply it to something here is conjecture at best. Exactly what'll happen to the State Water Project. That's been going on since Jerry Brown's first administration. And to say that it's going to happen at all or in what format is, you can't take that and try to inform this sort of thing. All they can go on is what they know. All I know for the experience in Rainbow, like since the world hasn't changed, we lose farmers every single year, a bunch of them. Our demands continue to go down. When I started my first year, we sold 22,000 acre feet. Now we're down to 12. And so, this is not something that we have time. Time isn't on our side in the agricultural community. That's why I think the last bullet point that they made is that some special consideration needs to begin for agriculture. Agriculture is dying in the North County. That's our only economic engine. We have 13 signalized intersections in Rainbow. And so that's all we got. And so we can kill it. You guys all want to say kill it. It's not going to be replaced by homes. You don't put homes where avocados grow because it's like this. And so I think that all this talk about, we just need more time, maybe we can work it out. We've been at this for almost 4 years. And every year, more and more farmers go under, and the economic prospects in our area go down. So I'm not in favor of anything that delays this thing.
All right, I think we've exhausted this, and the back and forth continues.
Yes.
Can we? vote
Yeah,
to
never
just
meeting
stay
it.
on?
We all agree on that. This body should never come back.
I think that will conclude our item. I'm getting no sense or taste from any sort of formal recommendation, so we will conclude the item with everybody's individual position and remarks and include it a part of the record. So that will conclude item 5B. We'll move on to 5C, which is our future schedule. I just wanted to make some remarks to the members to just thank you so much for your participation. It's been a long, arduous process. As Lydia and Brian mentioned, thank you for the members that aren't a part of the water world. It's been an experience for me as well. It's been a complete learning process. But just to give a quick future schedule, Keen, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to take the advisory committees, this committee's remarks and comments and positions, and evaluate them further. We will compile a final draft report that would conclude April 21st, which would then go out for a 45-day public review, which we will continue to entertain all comments from interested parties. Once that's complete, then we will put into a final report and agenda with the tentative date of going to the LAFCO Commission on June 5th. So that would conclude item 5C, unless there's any other questions or comments to that.
I just want to go on the record. I think it's been a yeoman's effort. And I do think it's a very comprehensive report. To Keen's question earlier, I think all the comments that were addressed today are the only ones remaining outstanding.
Thank you. And that will conclude 5C, and 5D is just any additional requests or comments. And I think we can forego that as we've had everybody's robust conversation and dialogue today. So with that, our meeting is adjourned, and thank you so much.